Today I'm going to show you 4 ways I use Max for Live. For mixing and mastering, for loops and clips. We're going to build a little virtual instrument with an audio effect today. And I'm going to show you how I use it for my video in sync with my music, meaning I'm going to show you how I do it for audio reactivity. Now, the first thing you need to think about with Max for Live, and we tend to get really intimidated by it, is you don't need to have a lot of coding or programming experience. You just need to come to the table with the willingness to learn, to experiment, and just a lot of curiosity. A lot of people really can't define Max for Live, but if you think of Max for Live as it's a companion piece to Ableton Live. And what you do primarily in Max for Live is you can build custom devices or instruments or different audio effects that you design yourself or in tandem with the Ableton Live clips and samples. And there are just like so many endless ways you can use this tool to spark your creativity. Another thing that you can do with this, and you'll find as you experiment with Max for Live what you want to use it for. But I'm going to show you today the sort of gateway that encouraged me or sparked more creativity for me to just start experimenting with it. And whether at one point I was learning how to build my own generative devices, custom audio effects, and now, and this is something that you can do in Max for Live eventually, is you can build your own custom MIDI sequencers and controllers. And that's at a very advanced level. But today I'm just going to show you a very, very simple ways that you can use it to expand your sound and even expand your live performances. And when I say live, you can also make your DJ sets, if you have the ability, you can have your DJ sets sync with your own visuals depending on the venue that you're at. And I'm going to show you a little bit today of my favorite ways of using it. A little background, the reason why I came to Max for Live was sort of not for music, but because I wanted to have my visuals become audio reactive with my music, and no other program was doing it for me. And when I did my research and I started playing with Max for Live, I realized this is it. And I am not a coder or a programmer. I'm just more of a music and creative technologist. So now the first thing I want to talk about is here. We're going to dive in now. I want you to look at the left-hand column here, and we're just in a regular Ableton Live environment. You have your Max audio effect, your Max instrument, and then you have your Max MIDI effects. Now, a great way to get started is to really think about these as VSTs or plugins, and they're really not that different from what Ableton provides, right? And the best way to really spark your creativity and to create a more expansive sound is to just dive in and find the ones you want and customize, right? So I want to show you a primary example of how I started to use it. You get a pre-master, or you've been working on a pre-master. You've been working on a mix, and the pre-master you love. It's decent, right? But in my experience, my pre-masters aren't done. Maybe I don't like what FabFilter does. Maybe I don't like what Ableton does. And when I started playing with Max, I realized I could build a more expansive spatial sound by not programming, by playing with it. So I'm going to show you a few of the ways I love to use Max for my pre-masters. And now what we have here are 5 of the ones I think are some of the best that you should pay attention to. We have the peak limiter, a pan stereo, a gain, a surround panner, and a convolution reverb. I want to play my pre-master for you just without these. Decent. It's a good pre-master. Now I'm going to show you what Max can do. I don't want it to redline or get too hot, so I'm going to do a peak limiter. I want more amplitude in the pan. Right, now I hear it. And I want to play with more spatial components. Maybe I want a little bit more reverb. So it's already sounding a little more, it's already sounding a little bit more dimensional. So these are the ones I love to play with when it comes to really finessing my pre-masters as much as possible. Now, mind you, it's already a good pre-master, but when you hear it in headphones or you're hearing it more in surround, I can't really thump it, it becomes more crystalline. And these are just some ways you can play with Max, but this is the gateway. And the other thing I want to show you is, and this was really important for me, the thing with Ableton and Max for Live is, once again, you have to see it as a companion piece. So say you buy a splice sample, right? And this one right here, I got from Splice. This one right here, this drum and bass, just this plain drum and bass one, I just dragged over from Ableton. Okay, great. But someone hearing my track is going to hear that, or, you know, I know I can do better than that. And it's flat. Thank you, Ableton. I love this. But how do you make something your own? And I feel like with Max, you can really create your own signature sound. And the thing I did with this drum and bass, it's a clip that I just dragged over. What you're seeing are MIDI, are Max MIDI effects, audio effects that I put down here. And I just want to show you what happens to this regular Ableton clip, right? We have a standard gain. Okay, good. And then from the Max MIDI effects, we got something happening here. I love this effect. We got a filter delay, right? I want to put more of a ring modular on it. And then a cyclotron. It's not just a drum and bass anymore. It's more spatial. The sound is traveling. It's almost very generative. And you have to think of this as you're finding your own way, and what you really have done is created your own sound. So that's just a regular Ableton clip that I basically dragged over. And the one thing I want to advise you, this is the arpeggiator. I dragged in from the Max for Live MIDI effects. So that's also a good thing to do in terms of building out your sound and playing with your sound. Now you're in Splice, and it's a very recognizable sample, right? But you want to make it your own, or you don't want to just drag a Splice clip into your production, right? So what you can think about doing as well is, even if they're like super cool, even if they're like, let's see here. This is already such a cool little splice sample, right? But I found this expression control and this max polybeat, and these two are MIDI effects. By the way, you can sync these to any MIDI controller. You can map these to your MIDI controller. It has the same capability as Ableton. You can do all this. And I actually just did, this is an expression control. And I just started messing, I mapped these dials with the expression control, which is a Max for Live MIDI effect. So what this did was it created a whole other kind of sample, right? So those are just some of the capabilities in terms of how Max can really expand your sound. Now, okay, we're going to shift or pivot over into the Max for Live programming environment, and we're going to build an audio effect and a virtual instrument. And I don't want you to be scared. It's just a matter of practice. It's a matter of, it is kind of order of operations at the same time, but you just have to have a willingness to really dive in as much as possible. So we're gonna get out of here, and we're gonna go into here, okay? So I have this, once again, this just regular kind of, this I dragged over, it's a clip from Ableton. There's nothing Max for Live in this, it's just pure Ableton. Cute. But how do I really customize this or build an audio effect around it, right? Well, first I want to show you something. Let's go into this oscillator here. This is a virtual instrument that basically I embellished. Before, it didn't really have that much gain capability. And I want to play this for you. So. This is known as a virtual instrument, right? And the best way to learn about the virtual instruments you're going to be playing with is to get into the Max programming environment and get out of your comfort zone. So this icon right here gets you into Max for Live. So I'm gonna click here, and the program's gonna open up. Okay, here we are. Now, I'm just going to show you real quick. The best way to learn about your virtual instruments and how they were made is to see how they're constructed in the patching environment, right? And if I don't really know how something was made, with the instrument already pre-patched in here, I click on something called the presentation mode right here, and it tells me how everything was made. And I can learn about it. So the thing with Max for Live is it's open source and it's built for learning. It's here to guide you. So I'm just showing you a little example of what this can do. So I want to get out of here. No, I don't want to save. Okay, now let's go back into our environment. I have a regular Ableton sample here, as I showed you, like clip. And we're gonna build. So the first thing I need to do is get into my Max for Live programming patching environment. This icon right here, along with the first one here, and you're gonna see the same thing in the MIDI, those are empty patch environments. That's where you're going to build your effects, your virtual instruments. That's where you're going to experiment and learn, just basically learn how to program your own sounds or build your own sounds. And you have to think about this in terms of, this is how I think of Max for Live. I think of Max for Live as the joystick and Ableton Live as the video game you're playing. You actually have to see it that way instead of seeing it as, I have to be a programmer, because you have to just think about it creatively. So I'm going to click on this icon right here to get into the patching environment. So we're in what I call the patching environment. Now, it tends to get a little, at first, overwhelming because you don't know what's what, but the only way to really familiarize yourself with it is to play. But I'm going to give you a few commands, essential commands that'll save you a lot of time, sweat and tears, and I'm going to give you a broad overview of what some of these functions do. But today, as a beginner, as someone, and I found as I was just starting out, these were the functions that I was using the most, and that will help you. So for today, we're going to talk about lock unlock, presentation mode. We're going to talk about the data right here, such as the videos, the top here, and to the right. So the thing to think about when you're in a patching environment is the top functions are things we can add to our patcher. This is our patching environment. The left are different types of data, like photos, videos, more plugins, Visi effects. We'll be playing with that today, by the way. And on the bottom, we have functions that control the patch. And then on the right, we'll be working with the inspector today, by the way. This right here is very important. This to the right is information that builds what happens in the patcher. Basically, you're building out your parameters, okay? I know it's a lot, but I'm gonna visually show you. So there are commands that you should know right off the bat. Command E, Command I, Command S. And I'm gonna show you how to insert objects. Now, with Command E, you're gonna see something happen here. Hold on one second, there we go. You're gonna see all the little grids disappear, okay? This is lock, unlock, right here. So this is extremely important, okay? And this is the command I actually use the most. When it's locked, you can interact, right here is like a patch, right? A patch with objects. You can interact with the patch itself, right? And you can edit the patch, but you can't get the patch to play. It can only play when it's unlocked, meaning that if I build a gain and want to turn the gain up, it'll only work when it's locked. If I want to edit the gain, I can't do it when it's locked. I have to do it when it's unlocked. That's kind of like a builder mode. So you have to think of your patching environment as builder mode, right? So what you're seeing here, right here, are a lot of objects and a lot of comments. And the thing that I want to emphasize the most, and people usually get this confused, objects are not numbers or values when you're programming in Max for Live. Objects are data. So a simple definition for how you're going to insert your own objects is basically their functions, it's data functions that are going to be connected together with patch cords and patch cables for audio processing, to provide like different ways to manipulate different elements, and it gives you a visual way to create. So I'm going to show you a few things here. So how do I put what I want to create in here? Okay, up here you have N for object. You're going to press the N key. And these will guide you. Everything is here to guide you, okay? You have dials, or you can do an object to get that dial. You could do N, dial, and you see that everything is here in just a whole menu. All these options pop up, right? But since we're going to use Max for Live today, I want to use the live options, the live plugins. So I'm going to, let's see here, just delete these. These we don't need. Okay, now right here are comments, and you can, when you're organizing your instruments, you can do a comment just with C, or you can have different buttons. And the one that we're going to be using today are, well, numbers are very important to input value, so that's I for integer. But today we're going to just really be focusing on the objects themselves. Okay, one thing I want you to pay attention to as well, we can delete these comments because we want a really clean environment here. This is a signal flow that's happening right here. You have to think about this as just an IRL situation. It's signal flow. And basically what happens is you're going to be building a device where there's signal flow. The signal comes in and it goes out. So whatever happens between these two will affect how the signal will be treated in the output. So I'm going to show you an example of this. Basically, if I go into live, you see here, and I play my little patch here, this is the best way to illustrate it. If I disconnect this, meaning I just delete it, like I said, Max for Live is your joystick, the world you're creating, and Ableton's almost like, it's a video game type thing. So now you only see the left coming out, right? Easy, really easy. But I want to do more with this, right? So we got a basic idea of what signal flow is. These are objects, these are your patch chords. Let's make this more dynamic, okay? We're gonna build, let's see, let's build, let's build a game. And how I got that, once again, was just by object, or I could have just dragged a gain in from up here, okay? And what you're essentially doing is you're building an interface in here in a very easy, kind of intuitive way. But I want to show you something here. We're going to unplug all this, keep these, and I have to be able to tell Ableton what to do. This is what we're going to do. We're going to tell Ableton that we want more of a gain, right? But we have to get that signal into Ableton. So I'm going to put this over here. This we don't need, that we don't need. And I'm going to show you a couple things. And this is where the learning really starts. You have your input channel 1, input channel 2. You have your channel 1 here, which is the audio signal. And the channel 2. Same thing here, but it's your output. One thing you're going to notice is here you have 5. Now, when you plug in a device, like, not all objects are created equal, right? They're going to have different inputs, outputs, randomly generated, it says. So you're not going to really know right away what to do with these. But I know with the gain, I have a channel 1 and a channel 2. And here I have an output channel 1 and an output channel 2. So all I'm going to do is just connect them like this. I'm going to ignore these other 3 because my output doesn't require a parameter value or a parameter raw value. It doesn't even require an amplitude. This does not call for that. It's just this. These 2. How do I get this to work? Well, I can't do this. Nothing's happening here. You know why? Command E. I have to lock it. Okay, something's happening. Let's see what's happening. Ooh, might be getting really loud. Yeah. You just told Ableton what to do. Now, we're going to build something with this gain. We're going to build like a little virtual environment with this gain. So I'm going to unlock. I want maybe to put more of a dynamic like distortion on this, right? And I have to be able to get that into these signals here. And I want the gain to just be the amplitude and volume of this distortion. So I'm going to have to delete these, and I'm going to show you a few things. I'm going to input, I'm just going to press N, and okay, let's do a degrade. I'm going to show you exactly what you're playing with when you're just building out some of the effects and instruments that you want. We have a degrade here, and up here we have an input, a float signal, and a resolution in bits. And right here, we just have an output. Okay, I know what to do with that. I have to get it to process between these two, right? Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, how does she know all this? I didn't learn, like, I taught myself, but Max for Live actually taught me. Meaning that if you don't know how something works, I'm gonna do this. This is what is really gonna get you there. Right click. First of all, I want everyone, hopefully everyone gets in the habit of doing this, but when you right click and you click on reference, a whole world sort of pops up in terms of what you can do with your object. You have attributes, what an integer is. I didn't know what a float was, but this was a lot of reading, and okay, it's telling me exactly what it does. And then, by the way, it has all these built-in tutorials when you go to your reference, right? But say you're more of a visual learner, like I am, I'm going to right-click again, and I'm going to go to Help, and there's a screen that pops up. And I don't want to build my patch exactly like this. I just want to know how the degrade, what the values are in the degrade. I'm seeing it's 1 point, it's just a decimal, and I'm seeing the bits are 1 through 24. And we'll come back to that in a second. So the other thing too is, if I want to build it this way, which is a little bit more complicated, I can literally Command E, copy, and paste that into my patch. It's a great tool, and it's a great way to learn and play. But you really just want to get in the habit of practicing so you can build your own custom plugins and instruments. So we're going to come back to that in a second, right? This we don't need. So I know that I can go here and here into my gain. This is already plugged in, and I can do my signal input, just a regular signal input, okay? That makes sense. And the reason why I chose these two, because it only requires one output, but these two aren't going to work with just a regular connection, okay? How do I know to put a decimal in here and whole numbers between 1 and 24 in here? How am I even going to do that? You can make a little dial. Isn't this cute? I love this. You can make a little dial, but this is where our parameters come in. So, hold on. Yeah, this is where our parameters come in. This is when we start really getting into the groove, right? So we can't do 0 through 127. Because if I connect this little dial to here, that's not going to work, because when I clicked help, remember, there was just a decimal. It was 0.1. It's going to redline, and it's not going to be good for my gain, or there's going to be absolutely no data that comes out. So I have to refer to what it calls for. So this calls for a float. This part right here, what do you see? Integer float. Okay. So I want to, before I connect these, I have to change the value. So I'm going to click on my little dial, Command I. I'm going to scroll down to parameter, because I want to change this parameter or build a parameter around it. So I also want to stay very organized. This part is going to be called, let's see here. Yeah, it's going to just be called a downgrader. So it's really good to stay as organized as possible. So I'm going to give it a long name, DG. This is a float. It's going to be 0.01. This is a range, okay? So this is a decimal range, and then I want to enable this value and click here and change this to float, because it's not an integer. So there are a few things in order operations I have to remember when I input values into a dial. Parameter, name it, make sure the type is float, put in the range that the help reference gave me, click enable so it reads that, and make sure that it's a float. And I'm going to show you why this is important. So let's see if that worked. Yes, my dial actually changed right away. I want to connect this right now, and I want to see what happens. Okay, it's plugged in. So what is going to happen with this? Okay. Let's see here. It's doing it. Okay, fun. I can make it a little bit more cool with the bit crusher. So I'm going to, one more thing. I'm going to make a cute little dial, another cute little dial. Live.dial here. Oops, not another object. And then what does this call for again? This is just a regular integer. You'll notice that integers are just whole numbers, and float and signals are decimals. Sorry, just remember that. I forgot to say that. Float and signals are the decimals, and anything that's int signal is a whole number, okay? So I'm going to, what am I going to do? Oh, I'm going to go highlight this, click on it. I'm going to go back to inspector. This is going to be like my little bit crusher, right? This is going to be my little BC. It's an integer. The range is 1 through 24 because our reference told us that. Our little help guide. Let's see here, 1 space 24. I have to initialize this again. Click, it's an integer. Let's see what happened. It worked. Okay. I'm building it. You're building it. Okay, so you're going to connect these. Yep. 1 through 24. Bam. Awesome. Now let's see if this works. It's working. Yep. So essentially, we just built an audio effect kind of instrument at the same time, right? Now, How do I get it into Ableton though? How do I get it into Ableton so I can do other cool things, say, with a MIDI controller? What if I built this and I had like a bigger virtual instrument? Well, this is how you get into the habit of organizing yourself. Or what if I just want this thing that we designed to just be in our Ableton and to save it into our Ableton so we don't have to design it again, right? So I have to think about this in a couple ways. First, what I want to do is I want to save this, and I'm going to show you what happens. I'm going to Control S, actually, and I'm going to do bit crusher thingy. And it's automatically going to just save into my audio effects. I want to see what that did in Ableton. Okay, my bit crusher thing showed up in Ableton. Awesome. We're not done though. We have a couple more steps, and this is so key. And once you start building more, you'll understand why this is important. At first, it'll be tedious, but you'll start getting the hang of it. This is not a sustainable way of keeping your instruments and organizing yourself in Ableton. And the key thing in Max for Live is to stay as organized as possible, meaning to label things, meaning that you want to be controller ready, mapping ready for anything, right? So I have to get this to look better and design it as an interface in Ableton Live. So I'm going to show you how to do that in Max. Few things that are really important is Command E. I have to get these things to show up in presentation mode. And by the way, if you save it like this, it won't really save. And if you keep it this way, it'll crash. So we want to really like take out all these plugins that we don't need in Ableton. So I just want the controls. I just want my instrument interface to show up in Ableton and eventually just get out of the Max environment. So I'm going to just click, I'm going to shift and click all my little controls I designed. I'm going to right click. Oops. Shift. And then I'm going to go to add a presentation. And earlier I said we're going to be playing with presentation mode. I'm going to click here, and you're going to see that it's now in presentation mode. And now I'm going to build a little bit crusher dial thing here. I want it to show up nice and neat in my Ableton. Now you're probably wondering why, well, don't I need all the other stuff? You don't need all the other stuff. That's signal flow. It's already been programmed. We just want our little instrument interface in there, right? And these pink highlights mean it's already in there. So we've done it right. But we have to save it now. So one more thing I have to do, inspector again, view. Literally, just click on open in presentation. This means open in presentation in Ableton. It's different than that, right? So I'm going to click on this, Control S, bam. It showed up here. Now it's in my Ableton. You've designed a little interface for your audio effect and your little instrument, your little bit crusher, right? Let's play. Let's see what happens. So you just took a regular Ableton clip and embellished it, but you can also save this. You just design your own little bit crusher thing. And you can use this on other samples, on the hardware loops you make, anything. That is really one of the most powerful things about Max for Live. Now I'm going to get to the video and the music part, okay? So I'm going to get out of this. And the real important thing you need to know about Max for Live is When you're working with audio effects and engineering, that's one thing. But you need to get into the habit with Max for Live, and I like to do this. When I'm working with video in Max for Live, I like to keep it separate from all my other video virtual instrument capabilities. Let me see here. Oh yeah, this one. Oops. So I want to be able to make sure that, yep, okay. So I'm in my session now. So you notice that when I just come to a blank Ableton session and I know that I'm going to be playing with video, like my tracks, for instance, I want to play with my track, like the pre-master track, and I have visuals that I made. Like I have a video that I want to play with. I know I want to perform this live, or I want to DJ this song and do something cool with it live, right? And I'm going to show you an example of that after this, okay? So I'm going to just do this from a plain Max audio effect, clean, because I want to hear my audio and I want to see my video at the same time. That's an easy step. So I'm going to get back into my patching environment, and I'm going to show you the way I sort of taught myself and the way that I started to familiarize myself with video before I got generative with it, okay? The important thing to do and to remember is you have your data here. But Visi is very magical. It looks cheesy, it seems cheesy. No, it depends on what you do with it. You have all these videos here that are built-in content. And if I play with the videos here in the built-in content, it's just going to do a thing. It's just going to do what it does, and that's okay. But I really want to be able to see the capabilities of what Visi has with video. So you have to think of video and Max for Live as you have input, you have output, just like you would have audio, right? So I'm going to click input. Let me see here. You have Visi. And I'm going to click player. Oops. I have a player here now. That is where you drop your movies. It's just a video player, right? And I use this one the most. I dragged some of the built-in video content. I just dragged that into here. Cool, it's playing. What's my output now? Let's see here. I'm going to go to my output. We don't need a recorder. We don't need a snapper because that's just freezes still images. We don't need a viewer just yet. We need our projector. So that's actually the most common one to use. So now, really, video output, video input. And let's see what happens. Bam. Cool. It's showing up. So that's easy enough, right? Get out of that. Okay, so now the thing also to remember is we want to be able to, hold on one second. We want to be able to get back into our screen. Here we go. Now, we want to be able to think of this in terms of how do we put effects on this, right? I'm going to click here. And experiment. And this is where you find or customize or just play with, let's see, maybe I want a multi-layer. This is one of my favorite ones. Or I want a fractalizer. It's one of my favorite ones, right? And before you start using your own video, it's good to just, I advise you just to familiarize yourself with what anything is. Like, I never knew what a fractalizer was before I started using Max for Live. And literally output, input, you connect the dots. Now, something's happening here. Cool. E, let me see what happens here. Yep, things are working. Things are changing the way I want them to. Awesome. I mean, it's amazing what you can do when you just dive in and you play and you literally just connect the dots. It's a gateway. So I want to show you something now that's super important. You're probably thinking to yourself, okay, how do I get this to sync up with the frequencies or the beats in my music? That's the question. So I'm going to get out of here. Don't want to save that. And I'm going to show you a pure example of how I do this. It's very important that, here we go. It's very, very important that you know too, when you're creating video, you have to get out of everything. You can't have Spotify open, you can't have anything open because I have an audio effect open and other things. I don't want anything to crash, so I did a little screen grab for you, but I'm gonna narrate it for you and I want you to really, really pay attention to this because this is the part where you get to really learn how to be audio reactive with Max for Live. So the first thing you need to remember is, once again, just a regular audio environment, right? And we'll go here. And what I needed to do is I needed to think about this in terms of, okay, I need to input my video. So I went, put in the player, and then I literally took a video from my desktop that I made the visuals already. It were already made, and I just dragged it in. Let's see here. And then what I did, okay, it's reading the file. That you have to make sure it's the right file, .mov. And I needed to also make sure that, yeah, I wanted to get my favorite effects in there. The multi-layer is important depending on what you want to do with your visuals. And Fractalizer is super fun. And also, I think it was the stretcher. The stretcher is actually super fun. And it's just a matter of playing. And the other ones that say generate, those are fun too, but I wanted to keep it simple. So I have my projector up so I can see what I'm doing. And once again, I have to connect the dots with these, right? Because these are just the simple effects. We don't need that one. We need this one. Now, these don't have to be in any particular order. There's no order of operations with how you can do these Visi effects, right? You literally just connect the dots and see how everything works. You can disconnect things. Now, the inputs and outputs on the top, that's when you get more granular with audio effects. You can build audio effects and other devices on top of the inputs and outputs there. But we're just gonna keep it simple for today. Now I need to see if these even work and how they look on my video that I just inputted in. So I'm going to, yep, everything's working fine. My Y origins, my colors, everything's working great. Okay. Cool. So now what I have to do is I have to think about, first off, saving it before you do anything else so it doesn't crash and so you do not lose your configuration in Max for Live. And okay, so what happened is you can see at the bottom right, the player in Ableton is showing up. But again, as you can see, it's not organized. This isn't sustainable. I can't MIDI map this yet. I can't really do anything with it. I can't even put audio effects on it yet. So I have to put this in presentation mode. I have to hit the Shift key and highlight all the Visi controls that I want. And then I'm going to right click, add to presentation. And I need to make sure that it even shows up there. Okay, cool. And you need to, it's really, really important to realize that how you design something in the Max patch is really going to affect how you use it. Once again, organized, clean, side by side, because you're really working with cables here. And it's like IRL. I sort of believe if your cables IRL are all in a bunch, it's going to affect your sound and how you feel in your studio. And you need to think of Max for Live that way, right? So everything's nice and neat. Everything's there. I'm going to go to the inspector now and make sure. And by the way, if you just see a black screen, you just click on P. Okay, View, Open in Presentation. And then you're going to Command Save. Well, not that. You're going to Command Save. And then, okay, it showed up. Nice and neat. Ready for me to map my audio, right? My screen is still live. My video is still live. Everything's great. Now I'm going to show you how to get your music and your video to be audio reactive. And when I say audio reactive, it means generative. It means it's moving with the music. And first, well, I did this on purpose, but it's good to have your audio already into Ableton Live. But if you've already built out your video capability, it's okay just to drag an audio file as long as like everything is saved, right? But just get into the habit of already having your audio there. So I have my audio. The first thing I need to think about is how am I going to map this? Maybe I want to focus on the mids, the highs, and the lows in the song that I'm going to be playing. So I'm going to just do a simple EQ3. And I want to map my frequencies to what's happening in Max for Live or into the visuals. So how I'm going to map these to get to talk to Max for Live is I'm going to use something called an envelope follower, which is a really fun tool. So I'm going to click the envelope follower. And by the way, Max is the extension for Max is .amxd. So I'm going to drag an envelope follower into the lows, and I'm going to, drag an envelope follower into the mids, and then I'm going to drag an envelope follower into the highs, right? Now I get to map. I get to map these according to my controls that I made in Max for Live. And I want to see what's happening here, yeah. Okay, so maybe I want my lows to be red, and maybe I want my mids to be the vertical and the fractalizer, and maybe I want my highs to be a blue. And let's see what happens now. It's working. It's working with the song. And we're not hearing the song because it's, I don't know why we're not hearing the song, but it's working with the song, and I'm going to show you how it works. So what I did, I'm going to show you a better example. What I did, what I'm about to show you was programmed just like this in Max for Live. Exactly like this. And I'm going to show you the final result. This is something I worked on that I played live, that was designed in Max for Live, and that was performed live with my MIDI controller. Oh, hold on one second, it's here. All right, so again, what we just mapped is exactly what I did with this. I made all the visuals. I generated all the visuals from GitHub, from different generators, through Blender, through other programs. But how you see this video about to move with the frequencies in the track was made in Max for Live. I wonder why I'm not hearing the sound. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Well, I have the song up here, okay.
It might be because of the screen recording?
No. That's not it. Okay, I'm just gonna play for the people at home. Okay, so basically, let's see here. Okay. Oh, that's why. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and play it, and I'm gonna show you how it moves. So every beat that you see here, every movement, every fractalization is moving with the mids, the highs, and the lows of the track. So you're seeing visuals, but all the colors, the pulses, the stretching, all of this was all made in Max for Live, and this was captured during the live performance. So not only was this playing, the video itself was just playing, but I had a MIDI controller, and I was able, and you can always do this in Max too if you have just a regular Novation controller and you click MIDI in Ableton Live, you can map your Max for Live effects that you've used. So the possibilities are pretty much endless. So this was just all done live. And I'm twisting knobs on my controller that are mapped to maybe the greens in the multi-layer, right? So in essence, you can design your own interactive performance with your own visuals, which is pretty amazing. Cool. So that is pretty much the gateway of how I started using Max for Live. And once again, you can learn anything in Max for Live. It's just a matter of getting into the patches, going into, let's see here, learning what each capability does, going into the references, going into, let's see here, going into the patches and learning about what each component does. And a good way to start learning, and I can't emphasize this enough, if you're a visual learner, you can play with video, because that's actually how I got started with it. And you can play with your MIDI controller, not design a MIDI controller in Max for Live, but use your MIDI controller with simple different audio effects in Max for Live. And right now, a big thing in the music industry is plugin design and software synths and audio effects. And this is a great tool to use in order to design them. So I hope you enjoyed this workshop, and thank you for coming. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, thank you so much.